good evening and welcome. Glad you could join us for the show. It's a good warm-up for the England match this evening. Do stay with us until then, or even after then, because not very much happens in the first 10 minutes of games. But we've taken a little bit of a summer break, but we return this evening with a couple of guests who've got quite a bit in common. Ray Matthews, you'll remember him as the guy that phenomenally ran 75 marathons in 75 days at the age of 75. I was astonished to realise when I was researching this that was fully 3 years ago. So Ray Matthews now is approaching 78 years of age and he's not retiring yet. He's got more feats to come, and we'll hear a little bit about those later. But talking of marathons, but we'll also obviously have a football theme, and we always do, running through the show. Ritchie Humphreys, well known of course in this area, former Sheffield Wednesday player, Hartlepool, Chesterfield among others, Sheffield FC, recently ran the London Marathon, Ritchie, and it's good to see you as well.
Good to see you, thanks for having me on again.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's always the cliche, but you two guys know full well the meaning of that. But I'm particularly honoured because of where you've actually been in recent times. Garden parties at Buckingham Palace. I think both of you have got that in common. Ray, quite recently.
Yeah, just incredible. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the honour. It was an amazing day, and it's a sense of occasion that you get caught up in. You can't avoid. I think you'd have to be brain dead if you didn't go along with what were happening.
Yeah.
We were close to the Queen. And she did shout out, remember me to Alan and tell him I watch all his shows, and yeah.
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
I'll take that. I'm not even going to treat that as a joke. She obviously did say that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and she passed on regards to James Gregg as well, I believe, who joins us in part two. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, right. Good. Ritchie, don't think you were mentioned in that conversation. You've also had the pleasure of Buckhouse.
Going back a few years for a significant contribution to national local life. I got an invitation sent to the club when I was at Hartlepool. Initially thought it was a wind-up off the lads. You know, I was like, who's gone to all this trouble to put, like, you know, the stamp on and the markings and stuff. And of course, when I made the phone call, it clearly wasn't a wind-up, and I was so, like I just said, you know, so honoured and privileged to be there to represent for what I'd done in Hartlepool. I believe it was for the kind of played consecutive games, 234 games on the bounce. So it was like 5.5 seasons. So honoured to be there amongst, you know, a real diverse section of people in life, people from military, people high A-level achievers, and people from the NHS service. And so it was a tremendous occasion. My wife-to-be came with me. My mum came down. My sister lives in London. So it was a tremendous occasion. Really honoured and really proud for the family.
Pinch yourself, moment,
absolutely,
really.
yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, you've got this common link. We're going to talk to Ritchie, steeped in Sheffield football as he is, about the prospects, any thoughts he has on the Owls and the Blades in this like trough that we have in the middle of summer. We carry on talking about it sometimes when there's very little to talk about. But I'll throw a little bit of transfer speculation your way, talk about Steve Bruce, who I know you know well, and obviously Chris Wilder and the achievement of Sheffield United. You can comment on. But you have this common thread. Ray, as I mentioned at the start, is an ultra-marathon man. I mean, he's done some phenomenal things. You're not finished yet, Ray, I believe. So the rumour has it.
I'll be dead when I finish.
Right.
There is no reason other than a broken big toe that's going to stop me doing anything.
But you've got a broken big toe at the moment.
I have, yeah. And it first happened probably about 5 years ago, and I was racing across the Sahara Desert, and what happened, we had a massive sandstorm 5 kilometres into an 100-kilometre race, and what happens is that I didn't realise at the time, but we were actually running on an ancient Bedouin trail which has got like a rocky base. Of course, over the years the sand covers it up, so you're not aware that there's any obstacles anywhere other than soft sand. But of course, when it's coming at you like you're being shot blasted against a brick wall, all of a sudden, when it is finally over, everything's changed.
Yeah.
So what were big dunes are now flat, and where there weren't any dunes is now dunes.
And of course, broken toe never heals, really. You can't
No.
set it or anything. So you've had a recurrence of that, which has grounded you.
Yeah.
Ritchie, though, quite recently ran the London Marathon. Of course, you've got form in this area. I think we talked to you on this programme before about your Ironman. You are officially an Ironman.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. But you did the London Marathon for Mind charity quite recently. We're going to come on to the subject of Steve Bruce and football, and and generally footballers paying, and the football industry paying more attention to mental health. But just tell us about your London Marathon experience before that.
Well, the London Marathon was always on my list to do when I retired from professional football. My wife did it a number of years ago and went down to support. I've been in London on a number of occasions when the race has been on, and been there to support friends or family that have done it, and just loved the occasion, always wanted to do it. So when I got a place through Mind charity, which was something I'd wanted to do, raise awareness, and particularly within my industry and I suppose in general life, the importance of talking about mental health and supporting each other and asking if everybody's okay. And just the occasion, obviously you've got to do the training for it. If you don't do the training for it, it's going to be hard work. And I think what's the difficulty about the London Marathon is, in this country, is you've got to get those miles in the winter when it's dark and it's blowy outside, and you've got to get up before work or do the work, do the hours after work when it's dark. And you've got to do that training, and I absolutely loved the day. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's the reward.
It is. And the reward also was to pace it right and not try and go off too quick and try and pace it. I wanted to do under 4 hours. I paced it at 3:45, managed to be pretty much bang on till about 18, 19 miles, and then it was hard work.
Right.
And then it was hard work, and I got 3:55, which I was delighted
Brilliant.
with. Yeah.
Under 4 hours is fantastic. And so then could you have run consecutively on the following 74 days another marathon?
In a word.
No, like this guy did.
This is incredible.
Yeah,
It's just
this guy
outstanding
did.
that I suppose age is just a number, but I've realised that you couldn't be a footballer for as long as you can, because of you can't do it as much as when you get older. The endurance-based stuff I do enjoy. I would like to continue to do things. I don't think I'll ever do something
as remarkable
as that. That's a good word for it. It's just truly remarkable. And it was, I was involved 5 days after the marathon with Francis Benali, ex-footballer, who was doing an event called Iron Fran, and he was trying to do 7 Ironmans in 7 days. So I was going along just to give him some support and stuff, and it was a remarkable achievement. He did 5 out of the 7. And raised a lot of money for cancer research, so it was tremendous effort from him.
When you say it quickly, it doesn't sound a lot, but it's a 2.4 mile swim followed by a 112 mile bike ride, and then a 26.2 mile full marathon consecutively, and he did that seven.
Well, he did 4 consecutive, and then he got pulled out on health grounds for a couple of days. And on one of those days, I joined in, and we did it. His support team all got together and said, look, we'll do the miles for him. He's done so much so far, and he managed to get back out there on the Sunday in his hometown of Southampton. Right. They flipped the bike and the run because the Southampton Marathon was on. So he had a lot of support in Southampton. I'm sure that would have been amazing for him. And then they finished it off with the bike, and he aimed to do £1 million for cancer research, and just after the a day or two after it had finished, they went over that mark, which is tremendous.
So I know you've raised for Mind charity. We'll talk about what you've raised and how people can contribute to that in a few minutes. And I know that you have, especially for Newman School at Rotherham. Right. You've done absolutely wonders for them, and you also go into schools to talk about the value of running to quite young children. We'll come to that. But just introduce a football interlude. I know Ray's interested. Sheffield United, first of all, Ritchie. I mean, you're a former Owls player, but I know you take an interest, and always have, in both sides of the
Nicely
of the
put,
city.
Nicely
Is that diplomatic?
That is diplomatic, correct.
So what do you make of it? Owls fans are probably sick of the tributes by now, but you can't. Praise is not high enough, really.
No, what Chris and his staff have done at Bramall Lane in the last couple of seasons, along with, I know some of the players because I deal with the club, but I'll say from the outside, if you like, what looks a tremendous work ethic between a group of players that want to achieve something together, and I think we've seen that in the celebrations and what it means to each other to get promoted. I've been in a promoted team myself, not into the Premier League, but you have special memories together, players, staff, supporters, and I think that's been evident with Sheffield United this season. But I think they deserved it. They were up there fighting for it last season, didn't quite make the playoffs, but then this season has just been, consistency's come into it, and then obviously the big turnaround in points and stuff over the Easter weekend, and then obviously they got it over the line.
Who do you know particularly well there?
Well, I've known Chris a long time, and I've known Alan obviously through football. Players-wise, I played against a lot of the players towards the end of my career. Obviously Billy and Basham and Moro. And I'll go into the club in my day job now and make sure that everybody's.
This is with the PFA.
That's correct, yeah.
And your role?
So my role is a delegate liaison. So I've got 18 clubs to look after. So United and Wednesday and a lot of clubs around here are all my clubs to make sure that they're first of all all okay. Any issues? How can we advise in terms of what happens when you're not a footballer anymore, like myself and other players that have been ex-members have been sat on this sofa? Have you got a transition plan in place? Because we don't know when football finishes for us. You don't really get to choose unless you come to an age like I did and you can't do it anymore.
Well, you carried on as long as you possibly could.
And I think most players would like to,
40,
but it's not always the case. It could be an injury, could be deselection. You may just want to then progress into something else, and it's about having that plan and try and make that transition as smooth and as short as possible.
We'll talk about mind charity and mental health issues in sport, just generally, because sport is part of life and people are affected by them right across the spectrum of life. But just let's switch to the other side of the city, to Sheffield Wednesday and Steve Bruce, who I believe you know particularly well. Actually.
I wouldn't say particularly well, but from being involved in football for a long time, he was extremely, I suppose, accommodating when I had my testimonial at Hartlepool. He was manager of Sunderland at the time and brought his full-strength team down just a week before the start of the season, brought all the new signings. So it was brilliant from that respect. And then, of course, other clubs he've managed, and since I've been doing the job I have at the PFA, with him being in charge at Villa and now at Sheffield Wednesday, and his staff, Steve Agnew is a former coach I worked with at Hartlepool, and obviously I know Bully and Steve Clemens. So what they did at the end of last season, I think, will be encouraging for Sheffield Wednesday supporters. I think there was a time towards the end of the season where they had a shout of an outside chance of the playoffs, so that's encouraging. And hopefully, they can have a season a bit like Sheffield United did last year and really push towards those playoff places and automatics.
And he thought, it's early days in the summer, fans on both sides of the city started to panic a bit and get twitchy, but this is early June and it's not unusual not to have made any signings because that contracts aren't out until the end of June anyway. Yeah. So there's not going to be much action, is there, really?
No, there can be one or two, but generally it's towards the back end of June, going into July in pre-season, right up until the first ball's kicked, really. Yeah.
Steve Bruce, a good appointment for Sheffield Wednesday? Common consensus he is. I mean, his record says that. So
yeah, I believe so. I think, and you could tell straight away from the work he did when he came in, got Sheffield Wednesday winning games, points on the board, and I think that's a good sign for this season.
Players he's been linked with are quite few, actually, but there are a couple, and these aren't official, but they're names that have been bandied around, and certainly a couple of names that supporters have quite warmed to. I mean, one is a guy that you've played with actually at Chesterfield, Sammy Morsey, who's at Wigan, and there's speculation that he could be on the move, that Steve Bruce is an admirer. I think quite a number of managers would be an admirer of him, don't you?
Sam's a good player, did tremendously well when I was at Chesterfield with him, and he's progressed through. I'm not sure Paul will want to let him go at Wigan. So he's a good player. He works hard. He's a good professional. Wants to improve. Wants to strive to improve himself every day. And he'll be one that I think maybe other people will be looking at as well.
Yeah, good hold. Well, he's a holding tick over midfield player. So I think he's just got a year left on contract. Hence the the theory and supposition. One player, though, that is definitely on the move is Mo Diame of Newcastle, who you remember that scored the winning goal for Hull against Sheffield Wednesday in the playoff final 2016. He's now come to the end of his contract. Any thoughts on him? I mean,
I think there'll be a number of players. Obviously, we know from work I do at this time of year, lots of players out of contract, and so it's a case for clubs to be looking. I think players will be speaking to their advisors. They'll be speaking to ourselves, and there'll be a number of players moving. Who are in contract or out of contract, so I think it's a waiting game for supporters anyway. I think you can't get your business done too early. It just doesn't seem to work that quick.
The thought is that by and large, I mean these are two sort of experienced to older spectrum players. By and large, more athleticism and youth is certainly what Steve Bruce has said, and what the aim is. And you can understand that because that squad's been together a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think he'll have had time to assess, won't he, as well? And like any manager and staff and recruitment officers will be getting together, and we'll have already got players in mind that they're targeting. And like I said, it can be a bit of a waiting game, but clubs do like to try and get things done early, but it's not. It's always simple as that.
I mean, the three out of contract have been offered new terms: Kieran Westwood, Kieran Lee, and Liam Palmer. I think most fans would say, come on, all three. Thumbs up to all three if deals can be agreed there. Absolutely. Yeah. You're not disagreeing with that?
No. I think, again, it's that uncertainty sometimes when you are a player and you are out of contract. Is there going to be a new contract on the table? What does that contract look like? Yeah.
Are there better offers?
Not necessarily, better offers. It doesn't really come down to finance all the time, but it can be a wary time. I know that, certainly as I got over 30, that it was uncertain. A one-year contract, and by March you think, well, I'm out of contract in the summer. You get a worry, you've got young children and things like that. So it can be an uncertain time, this off-season period for players, particularly if you are out of contract.
Yeah. Ray, you're doing work in schools regularly at the moment, and it strikes me that you're, a man of your calibre and credentials is being used in exactly the right way. Tell us just what you're doing. I believe
so. Yeah, I think I feel I'm in a position where I can make things work. I can make things happen. I'm getting called into schools. Obviously, I'm called in as Ray Matthews. Yeah. Not as any organisation, and the results already are astounding. So
you go in and talk to kids about the value of running, and there's this thing like this mile a day thing, isn't there, at the moment?
It's not new. It's been in existence 2 or 3 years. It were brought in from a lady called Elaine Wiley, who were an head teacher in a school in Scotland. Yeah. That looked at her children and thought, these kids are too obese. I need to do something about it. So she encouraged her kids to go out and it doesn't necessarily run, but walk a mile every day. Now I'm saying run a mile every day because for me, I want to see heart rates lifted. I want to see the testosterone levels lifted. I want to see the increase in brain capacity that is produced by physical activities where you take yourself out of your comfort zone. But also what's vitally important is that you give each child their own individual challenge. Right. What occurred to me when I first started on this was a comment that one of the teachers made to me. Kids can't run a mile. And I was just taken aback by that. You'd have to stop me after a mile when I was their age. Yeah. And I looked at it, and he's right. 100 yards down.
And do you find that the kids have been receptive to what you've...
Oh, wow, kids want to do it.
And so the schools keep inviting you back?
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely great. Richie was sort of smiling and nodding across the studio just then, and there's a reason. That's because one of the targets for your pep talk is of the right age. Sydney Humphreys is sitting on his laptop across the studio, and not watching his dad. Not watching his dad. He's taking no notice whatsoever of anything that's been being said, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back with lots more about Mind Charity, Newman School at Rotherham, the prospects for the Blades and the Owls, and James. See you then.